Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I hope my wellness warriors are doing fabulous this morning. I hope you're getting off to a great start. If you're just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I'm a Nana, a mom, a girlfriend. I am a health and wellness advocate, runner, jazzerciser, line dancer, studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. Which means that I am not, that I know a few things, mostly from personal experience, some from my education, but I am not a licensed mental health counselor. So what I'm sharing here today is not about diagnosis. It's not about labeling. It's about understanding, and it's about sharing peer wisdom, which is lived experience, because I have been in a lifelong battle with anxiety and depression. And I like to think I'm winning most days these days, but every once in a while it gets a little icky out there. But I also find that when we share information, like the information that I share with you, either out of personal experience or because I've researched something that's come to mind or that somebody has brought to me as a topic, when we share tips and tricks and experiences, internet is already doing weird things this morning. So hopefully there are no issues. So if you're here, let me know you're here. If you don't see this till afterwards, drop a comment, a question, interact, share if you find it helpful, all the things. If you do follow me regularly, then you know that last week I talked about back to school. And that video and the links that I dropped in the comments had tips on how to handle back to school week, which is what we're in my area right now, and beyond, back to school week and beyond. Whether you're a student, a parent, a teacher, or somewhere in between, a past student, a past teacher, a past parent. Well, you're never really a past parent, right? So in any case, if you are dealing with back to school, I hope you're having a great week, and just remember to give everybody, including yourself, a little bit of grace. So this week's topic came to me just a day before last week's video, over a schoolwork issue. I realized that I've talked advocacy, I've touched on that, but not about the precursor to advocacy, which is speaking up for ourselves, which is kind of the platform. So we need to know, and this was a big struggle for me, that being assertive is not the same as being aggressive. And a lot of times we think those things are equal, and they are really not. They're not the same thing. So you can speak up for yourself without having to be that, or without, scratch the having to be. You can speak up for yourself without being that person. And you know the one I'm talking about, the one that's raising holy hell in the grocery store or in a restaurant or whatever, and just being difficult and mean. And we can speak up for ourselves without being that person. So let's talk about that. So I'll start with the assignment and what happened here. So I had a video assignment. Well, I had a paper and a video for my class. And there were upload issues with the video assignment. So basically one of the thorns in my side is that every time I go to use a technological platform, they've moved my cheese. They've changed it in some way. It seems very difficult to be able to get on any technological platform and have it work the same way every time you use it. And in this instance, there is a video recording platform at my university that we are supposed to use to record video portions of assignments. And we haven't had a lot of those, but this particular week, which was the week before last, there was a paper with a portion that was a video assignment, and I had some struggles. I thought that I had it. I did all the things that I was supposed to do, and I thought that I had it, and I ultimately ended up putting a link to the video into my paper, which was an option because I could not get, even though I was following instructions, and I'm a fairly intelligent woman, so if I'm struggling, you know that it's probably not real user-friendly. But in any case, I struggled to get it uploaded. I ended up putting a link per the alternate instructions into my paper and submitting it. So fast forward to Tuesday before last week's Wellness Wednesday, and I woke up and I had my grade. And my grade was missing 20 points. So the instructor's comments, the summary comments that they give you, said that the video showed basically that it showed, and I'm paraphrasing, that my video showed that I had a grasp on the concepts and did very well, but in the rubric, the comments in the rubric said that the video was inaccessible. Well, obviously there's a big discrepancy here between the comments, right? And that was where I lost 20 of my 22 points, was in this video section. So I reached out to the professor, and I said, I struggled with this. I tried this. And I don't understand why the video was not accessible. It was accessible here, but not here. I included the link, and I need you to help me understand why this comment says that it was good, but this comment says that you weren't able to access it. So fortunately, he did not take very long to respond to me, and he advised that the summary comments that he made about the video being good were incorrect. He corrected those, and then he gave me until midnight that day to resubmit the assignment to get credit. Now, this is grad school. They don't have to do this. They can be like, you should have figured it out, or you should have reached out to me beforehand. But he was kind and he was flexible, and he allowed me the opportunity to resubmit the video so that he could give me full credit. And what ended up happening was I ended up getting, I was minus 2 points. So essentially what is being interesting this morning. So I hope I'm not having too much trouble on your end. So here's the deal. I was able to resubmit it for a regrade, and having a couple conversations with a couple different people in the process about what was going on. My daughter was like, oh, but it's still an 89 total out of the assignment. And I'm like, but you don't understand. It's bad enough when we lose points because of our own mistakes. But when we lose points because of something else that we have no control over, that's a different story. And as a grad student, I know a lot of people tell me that my grade point average doesn't matter, that they still call the person at the bottom of med school class a doctor. But I'm also applying for scholarships, and I rely on scholarship opportunities to help pay for college. So that 4.0 is important to me on a few different levels. And if it was a legit error that I made, I would have been okay with losing the points. Just like the other 2 points, there was legit feedback. I understood what was going on, and I'll apply it to my next assignment. But this was something I needed to speak up about. So, because there was confusion, there was a discrepancy in his comments. So, I'm way better than I used to be, but I still don't like to complain. I don't like to complain. I don't like to raise issues. I worry that I'm going to be viewed as the problem student, the problem customer, the problem whatever. And like I said, the only thing for me, and probably for a lot of you, is the only thing worse than losing points, money, etc., insert here, because of your own mistake, is when it's because of someone else's. And right at the time that I reached out, it looked to me, based on his feedback in the summary comments and his feedback on the rubric, that the mistake was his, not mine. So had I not reached out, I wouldn't have gotten the whole story, and I wouldn't have gotten and because of the way I reached out, that is probably more why I got the opportunity to resubmit than if I would have gone in barrels blazing like, what is your problem? Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. If I hadn't addressed it, I wouldn't have known what happened and wouldn't have gotten the chance to fix it. I would have assumed that the mistake was his. I might have, like I said, come at him barrels blazing, and he might have been like, it's your problem. You should have figured it out or reached out to me beforehand or talked to tech support. So I appreciate your feedback, mentioned the video, but the rubric says you couldn't access it. Can you please help me understand what happened? And it all worked out beautifully. So here's the problem. The problem is that we all have times that we need to speak up, whether it's related to work, family, a store, a restaurant, a bill, whatever. And we've chosen not to do it because we don't want to be that person, or we're frustrated with the situation. I know a lot of times for me, if I'm really frustrated with a situation, I won't speak up because I know that I'm not going to be able to control my frustration, and it's going to come out and maybe be perceived differently than what it's intended. But we've all had situations where we needed to speak up and chose not to. And that can be, that can have different repercussions. Sometimes it doesn't matter if we speak up, if we just let it go and we move on, and it's fine. But sometimes in some situations that can have different repercussions. In my case, if I would have let that go, I would have been halfway through the term and already way down on my grade, with not as much wiggle room as I like to have because of something that was not necessarily in my control. So if you've been in that situation, if you've been in a situation where you really needed to speak up and you did not, and you regretted it later, drop a comment, because I'm pretty sure we've all been there at some form or fashion. We've probably all also had a moment, maybe not all of us, where we've spoken up a little too much. I'm going to talk about that too, and regretted that moment as well. So if that's you, if you've experienced either or both of those, drop that in the comments, because I'd love to know. And it's okay. There's no judgment here, because I've been there. So the bottom line is why is this a problem for us? Well, this is a problem for us because we are taught, or we are afraid to take up space. A lot of times we're afraid to take up space because that's what we've been taught. This can go back to childhood teachings. If you're familiar with be seen and not heard. I know as a child, I grew up feeling like my feelings were unimportant. So I learned, and I often got punished for having any kind of reaction that wasn't ideal. So I learned that my feelings were not important, and I learned to stuff those and be quiet. A lot of times this can be learned behavior, like I just described, or from bullying. If you're getting picked on a lot, you learn to just kind of shut your mouth. People pleasing. People pleasers, we're afraid of judgment. We have a lack of confidence. There's a lot of reasons behind why we don't speak up. And we actually, my daughter and I talked recently about one of my grandkids who frequently defers to other people's desires. Like, he states that he wants something, and if somebody else in the family is like, no, I don't really like that, or hey, what about this? He just kind of is like, okay, we'll do that instead. And that's, you know what, at that age, that's not necessarily bad, but it is something to keep an eye on, because that can become a behavior pattern that results in constantly deferring to others and not standing up for yourself. I was also that way. He's very much his grandmother's child. I was also very much that way as a child myself, constantly deferring to other people's desires and trying to model that be seen and not heard, or not wanting to rock the boat because I didn't want people to dislike me. I didn't want to argue. I didn't everything. Anytime I tried to express my feelings, I felt like it turned into a confrontation. So I just learned not to do that. And that resulted in years of toxic relationships, toxic work environments, because I did not stand up for myself when I needed to. And even in the work environment, a lot of times I didn't stand up for myself in the name of professionalism. And sometimes, a lot of times, that was at my own expense. If you followed me for a long time, then you've heard me talk about workplace bullying and what I experienced a little bit. And that's where that falls into place. So, it's important to know that sometimes we need to stand up for ourselves. So when I was in retail, when I worked in the grocery store, some of you who have been wondering why my face looks so familiar, even if you never worked with me at the Builders Association, it's because for years I worked at Cash and Carry. And a lot of people remember my face from Cash and Carry. Yeah, I know. They're not around anymore, but you get the idea. And one of the things we learned when I was there, good morning, Miss Marie, is the rule of customer service is that for every one person that speaks up, there are 10 more who don't. They just go away because they're frustrated, they're disappointed, they didn't want to be that person, they didn't speak up, and you never see them again. And I find that not only to be true for the most part in the retail hospitality industry, but also across the board in a lot of other industries. When I was in charge of a membership organization, for every one person that spoke up, there were probably 10 more that didn't, but then never renewed their membership. Later on, through the grapevine, why this person was upset, why they never came back, but they never actually came and talked to me as the director. So I think that rule of customer service sometimes applies. For every one person that speaks up, there are 10 more that don't, that are frustrated, that are disappointed, that have been wronged, whatever, and they just didn't want to be that person that opened their mouth. And a lot of times that person is us. So sometimes sometimes we're in situations where we do have to be the one that calls attention to something, because if we don't, sometimes no one else will. But that's a little bit more on the advocacy side. We're going to talk more about that in a couple of minutes. So the flip side of this is that sometimes we keep quiet for too long. And then when we finally do speak up, we are so frustrated and we've been pushed so far that we lose it. And we are that person because we took so long to speak up and we bottled it up for so long. I can remember completely losing my noodle on my ex-husband years ago over a wooden spoon that he left floating in the sink, when my frustration had absolutely nothing to do with that wooden spoon, but I had been stuffing my frustrations for so long and I was having a bad day and my anxiety was up and there were other things going on that I just literally went off the rails over this wooden spoon when it had absolutely nothing to do with what I was upset about. So again, the flip side of being too quiet is that when we do it for too long, or trying to avoid that confrontation, is that when we do it for too long, sometimes something dumb or something little sets us off and then we completely explode and we don't handle it right at all. And it may be a little cathartic for us at some point, but we've done damage to ourselves, our relationship, whatever the case may be, that is much harder to repair. So then the other side of that coin, yeah, there are three, is that another thing that we do is we sometimes tend to make assumptions, like I could have done with my professor, assuming that because of his error in reporting that he made a mistake, and I could have gone at him barrels blazing. I could have been like, what is your problem? This comment doesn't match this comment. I included the link to my video. It's not my fault. I tried this, I tried that. And I could have gone at it with a completely different tone that, like I said, probably would have resulted in, you know what? You should have reached out to tech support or me before the assignment was due. Figure it out. This is your grade. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes we make assumptions and we go in barrels blazing, and then we become that person. Another situation, teachers are really busy, and I'm not trashing teachers in any way. But I was struggling. Her grade was dropping. There was something going on. There were assignments not being turned in. And because I was struggling to get communication with her teacher, I started making assumptions before I had all the information. Now, I did not go in barrels blazing, but I went into the school for an appointment prepared to open fire. Now, let me be clear. I am not that parent. I am that parent that honestly, most of the time assumed first that it was something my kid did before I assumed it was the teacher. And I know that we have a problem with that in this day and age where we tend to automatically point blame at the teachers. And a lot of times it's our kids. I was a teenager. I did dumb stuff. I should have known better, but I did. I made assumptions because I was struggling to connect with this teacher. And I went in prepared to go barrels blazing. And in about the first 5 minutes in that office, I learned really quick that it was my daughter that was the problem and not the teacher. And it was basically like getting the rug pulled out from underneath me. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more too. So what is the solution? What is the solution to all of these things? Well, when we speak up the right way, we get better understanding, we get more respect, and we get more results. It's kind of like that. You attract more flies with honey. I don't really want to attract flies, but there's some truth to that, okay? And I've experienced it over and over again when I've handled things in different ways, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not on purpose. When we speak up the right way, we open dialogue instead of debate. And what that means is that we are, assertiveness is direct, it's respectful, it's fact-based, and it's goal-oriented. Whereas aggression or aggressiveness is confrontational, it's heated, it's steamrolling, and the tone and the language and the body language, it all matters, whether you're dealing with it by text, in person, by phone, it all matters. And that's why a lot of times if I feel myself getting frustrated, I am like, if I'm dealing, sometimes there's a certain cable company that when I'm dealing with them, I get very frustrated. And a lot of times I'll be like, you know what? I'm getting frustrated and I don't want to be mean to you because you're the messenger. So I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call back later. And that is exactly what I'll do. So tone, language, body language, they matter when you are communicating. If you are voice and you're like this and you've got that face, all of those things precede whatever comes out of your mouth. And that's the bottom line. And they set the tone for whatever you're talking about to be perceived as aggressive instead of assertive. So We build confidence and empowerment over time. It takes a while. And when we're used to stuffing ourselves or shrinking in a corner, then it definitely takes time. And the first step is the hardest. Now, I've got all kinds of stories here. Some of them I've told before, but we don't have that kind of time today. So when we articulate our positions, feelings, and needs, we prevent others from making assumptions about us and making decisions for us. So what does it look like? Speaking up looks like clarity. It looks like calm confidence. It looks like respectful communication. That probably means no cuss words. That probably means no you. And we've talked a little bit about that before. It means expressing, it means not yelling and not demanding, but explaining your issue and asking someone else. This is what I mean by leading with curiosity, asking someone else to help you understand. Because you might have misunderstood something. You might have skimmed that email and missed the whole sentence that explained exactly the gap of information you're struggling with. You might have misunderstood what someone said. You might have heard one thing when they actually didn't say that. All of these things have happened to me, so I'm guilty on all levels. So again, speaking up looks like clarity. It looks like calm confidence. And I know that's hard sometimes. It looks like respectful communication, not yelling or demanding. And there's some steps here that I like to use, which is to amass knowledge. When I'm stressed out, when I'm ready to go barrels blazing, I have to step back and I have to keep my computer awake because I've got something over here I want to talk about. So when I have these issues, I find that I feel more in control. And yes, control is an issue here, always in these situations, if I am armed with information. So I amass knowledge, and that's what I recommend you do. And like in the case of the school incident, if I would have made it a point to communicate differently, or maybe call the school and ask for the teacher to call me instead of going by email, I might have gained more information that I wasn't obviously going to gain from my daughter at the time. She was a teenager, high schooler. She did not want me anywhere near the school. Most kids don't. Amass knowledge. Make sure you know what you're talking about before you open your mouth. I'm a huge fan of that. I don't like to weigh in if I don't feel like I know enough about the subject. Ask questions. Lead with curiosity. Like in the example of my email to the professor. This is what this said, and this is what this said. What am I missing? Am I missing something? Am I misunderstanding something? When you go at it like that, instead of what is your problem, your comments don't match what the heck is going on. It's a whole different feel, a whole different approach, and it's received completely differently. So arm yourself with knowledge. Ask open-ended questions. Research. Know your facts and any applicable policies or laws before going too far. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Express your concerns using I statements. We're going to talk about that in a minute too. And start with curiosity. Like I said, can you help me understand? Am I missing something? Do you have any insight on this? So I want to talk about I statements for a minute because I've talked about those before. And NAMI also uses I statements in a peer-to-peer class that I help to lead, which is an 8-week class that talks about coping skills, communication skills, great stuff, especially for people that suffer from anxiety. And here's an example of an I statement versus not an I statement, which is a you statement. Yes, lead with curiosity, Marie. A lot of times that's your honey. That's your honey for attracting flies or bees or whatever you want to call it, because I don't want to attract flies personally. But lead with curiosity is help me understand. What am I missing? So now back to I statements for just a minute. I statements are super important, and it took me a long time to learn how to use these, and it does make a difference. So an example of a you statement is you never clean up after yourself. That's accusatory. How do you feel when I say that to you? You didn't call me like you promised. You don't even care. You always make me feel small. How does that feel when I'm saying that to you, even though it's not you I'm talking to, right? When you hear that kind of tone and that kind of statement, you automatically are on the defensive. Whereas an I statement, so instead of you never clean up after yourself, you might say, That's an I statement. That's you taking responsibility for your feelings without pointing the finger at someone else. Now, if they're the one that's responsible for the mess, they might still get a little defensive. That's guilt now, okay? It's not because you're like, So I feel stressed out when the house is so disorganized instead of you never clean up after yourself. Instead of you didn't call me like you promised, I feel worried when I don't know whether you made it home safely. Let me tell you something. I probably could have done a whole lot better with my daughter when she first moved out of the house if I would have used, I feel worried when I don't know whether you made it home safely, instead of you didn't call me like you promised, or you didn't text me like you promised. You don't even care. Or you always make me feel so small. But the I statement version of that might look like, I feel sad when it seems like my feelings are not taken seriously. So you can see, I hope, and let me know in the comments if you do, you can see and feel the differences between those you statements and that accusatory, barrels blazing, aggressive, you, versus I feel this, and I feel that, and I'm concerned that. So there's a big difference there. The first time I used an I statement was by accident. I didn't even really know what I was doing, but I was trying to build my confidence, and I was terrified of confrontation. Essentially what happened was my ex-boyfriend, we had spent 2 or 3 years in a row of going to see his parents for Thanksgiving. And he started talking Thanksgiving plans in like August, September. And I hadn't spent Thanksgiving with my family in a couple of years, and it was really bothering me. And I was terrified to bring this up because, again, I always repeatedly felt that speaking my feelings was going to be confrontational. I thought that sharing my feelings was going to lead to a fight, to an argument, to a breakup, to a whatever, fill in the blank. And so I was not good at it, but I was trying to get better at it. And I really wanted to spend time with my family for Thanksgiving. So I said, I know that you love spending time with your family, and I do too, but I haven't seen, and I would really like to spend time with my family. And I was shaking, y'all. I was shaking. I was trembling. This was like around the time that I was kind of at my height of social anxiety. So my fears about speaking up were already exacerbated. And you know what the result I got was? Oh, well, okay, let's see if we can make it work so everybody can get together. Let me think about this, because I know that's important to you. And I was stunned, because it wasn't an argument. It wasn't, what problem do you have with my family? It wasn't all the scenarios that I rehearsed in my head. It was, he literally just never thought about the fact that I had a family too. And that happens a lot when we start getting into blended families, kids get married, things like that. We don't remember that they now have to be, kids have to be split up, families, not everybody can get together all the time, and logistics change. And it just never crossed his mind, because he was always laser focused on his family. And I was always happy to go along and never spoke up about it. Right. So, that's what I mean when I say using I statements. And that's an example of how doing that, even before I knew what an I statement was, made a huge difference in how things were going in my world. And the other thing that happened when I did that was I built confidence. That first step is the hardest, but the first time, and you're not always going to be successful. Sometimes, like I said, you're going to use an I statement. You're going to do all the things. You're not going to get the results you want, or you're still going to have somebody back in your face going, no, you're wrong, whatever it is. But each time that you do it, it gets a little easier, whether you get the results you want or not. And once you do get the results you want, or it doesn't turn into a blow up right out of the gate, it builds confidence, and we feel a little more confident about speaking up for ourselves the next time and in the next situation. So I had said before, arm yourself with knowledge, ask open-ended questions, lead with curiosity, research, know your facts. I have and this is going to start to relate to advocacy as well. I have a little acronym that just kind of made itself. Who knows? Maybe it's out there on the internet somewhere. And I call it ARP. It's not to be confused with AARP. We don't want to talk about age right now, right? This is ARP. Arm/ask. So arm being arm yourself with knowledge, or ask questions. So either way, it has to do with arming yourself with knowledge. So ask, research, and policy or law. So if whatever you're dealing with may be affected by a policy. For example, if you're struggling with the school and something has happened and you don't know how to approach it and you're frustrated, start with their policies. Find out what the policies are for that school to make sure that whatever it is you're having an issue with either fell within those policies or didn't fall within those policies. And that helps to formulate the questions. I had a situation come up recently where I'm questioning the legality of something that's been done. So what do I have to do? Instead of going barrels blazing and saying something like, is this even legal? I have to find out for myself and arm myself with knowledge in order to be able to appropriately address it, right? So ARP, A-R-P, not AARP, not for us older individuals. This is arm or ask, research, policy, or law. So A for ask, R for research, P for policy, which can sometimes be law. So that means arming yourself with knowledge, knowing your facts, and knowing any applicable laws or policies before going too far, especially when it comes to dealing with business entities about anything. Business entities, government agencies, schools, whatever, okay? Doctor's offices, mental health offices. So, and I can't stress enough, there's a time and a place for text and face-to-face and email in every situation. Sometimes when you first get started, texting or email is better because then you have some kind of a paper trail about your communications. But sometimes text leads to misunderstanding. You can't detect tone in a text. I know a handful of people who I do much better with on the phone or face-to-face versus text, because for whatever reason, I can say the same thing in text that I say on the phone, but they understand it better. If it's because of the tone of my voice or whatever, I don't know. But there's a time and place for text, for email, for face-to-face, and it's important to kind of get a feel for when those happen. If you are having emails and text conversations so that you have the paper trail, and y'all, I'm a huge fan of a paper trail, so that y'all have a paper trail, but there seems to still be constant misunderstanding, or stories are different for each person involved, that means it's time to get face-to-face or get on a phone call where everything's out on the table and nobody can misunderstand anything. Does that make sense? So there's a time and place for all of that. And also, if you're dealing with a business entity or a work environment or whatever, always follow the chain of command if there is one. If there is one, assume there's a chain of command. Follow it, because if you don't follow it, then you can struggle to get the results you need later because you didn't follow that chain of command. So always follow a chain of command if applicable, and use my minimum weight rule. If something has just made your head want to blow off, something you've just discovered, an email you just got, whatever, don't respond. I have a minimum weight rule. That minimum weight can be anywhere from 15 minutes to 4 hours, but it depends on how upset I am. So if I've just put my hands on a piece of information by talking to somebody, reading something, whatever, that made my head want to explode, I can't deal with it right away. I have to walk away. I have to reread. I have to make sure I understand what I'm looking at before I open my mouth. Because I am a skimmer. I think we all are in this day and age. We get so much email. We get so many texts. We're skimming through everything. We don't always see and hear what we think we saw and heard. So that's where that minimum weight rule comes in really handy. It gives us time to cool down, gives us time to breathe, gives us time to think about whatever it was, reread, rehear, whatever, and then approach it. So that's where we have to kind of start with speaking up for ourselves. It is okay to express our feelings, but we have to do it in a calm, respectful way. Rarely ever does yelling at someone or screaming or pointing a finger accomplish anything. It generally just puts other people on the defensive right out of the gate, and then you get exactly what you were trying to avoid, which is confrontation and a perception that you are being aggressive and unreasonable. Now, we're going to take that one step farther real quick before I wrap up, and we're going to talk advocacy. And I will drop the I Statements link that has those examples in the comments when I'm done. So advocacy is one step farther. We're talking about speaking up for ourselves, which is advocating for ourselves. But whether we're good at speaking for ourselves or not, sometimes we have to truly advocate for ourselves or a loved one. And this is often in situations, etc. Sometimes we have to advocate for ourselves at a little bit higher level, which is why some of my things that I talked about were what to do when you're dealing with business entities. And again, going in barrels blazing, especially in this day and age, because a lot of these businesses don't have the customer is always right mentality. You go in barrels blazing, yelling, screaming, pointing fingers, they're going to kick you out. And now they don't care what your problem was because you're being unreasonable. Okay? So when you have to advocate for yourself or a loved one, let's say, for example, that you have a child in school who some things are happening to that don't make a lot of sense. Stories are different from each teacher, each staff administrator, whatever. None of the stories match and it's confusing. And you're struggling to get responses to emails, to phone calls, whatever. Or let's say it's a doctor's office and you want a second opinion and you're struggling to get the doctor to respond. So this can apply in so many situations, a court situation where you're having to defend yourself. And this is where a lot of these tips are going to come into play on this bigger level, okay? The same principles apply, but we might need to work a little bit more at some of them. So again, the same thing. ARP, arm yourself with knowledge, know your facts, do the research, make sure you know what the policies and laws are regarding your issue, okay? Because especially if you're dealing with a business entity or a government agency, a medical office, whatever, there are policies. There are things you signed that talk about some of those policies. It's a good idea to go back and read those if you didn't read them when you signed them. You were in the doctor's office, you were worried about how you were feeling, you just wanted to get it done, so you just started signing all the oh, this looks like medical, okay. And you start signing the stuff, you don't read it. A lot of times in that paperwork are policies. They're office policies about payment, cancellation. Sometimes they may be other policies. So it's important to know that information. When it comes to some of these bigger issues, y'all, I am a copious note taker. I am a copious note taker, especially when I'm dealing with billing issues with that local cable company we talked about. You know, I am a note taker. I will sit there with the invoice while I'm on the phone. I write down the date. I write down the name of everybody I talked to. I write down what they said. That way, if I have an ongoing issue that ensues for 2 or 3 months, which I have had before, not as much these days, because I could not access my bills online. I could see the total amounts they were getting paid. I could not access the bills. And the first time I called, they sent me a copy of the bill that I needed for a scholarship application, but they didn't fix the problem. So when I called back, I'm like, back in May, I talked to so-and-so, and this is what we discussed, and this is why, and I'm still having this problem. So they sent me an invoice, and that worked for then, but I still have this problem. And when you have that kind of documentation and that kind of note-taking, it makes a huge, huge difference. And I could go on for a long time on this, but today is already running a little long, so I'll try to keep this short. Document, document, document. And make sure that when you're making notes, that you try to keep them not very subjective, that you try to keep them objective. Not, he sounded like a jerk on the phone. That's subjective. You want to keep the emotion out of it when you're making notes, whatever it is, whether it's a billing issue, whether it's a school issue, whether it's a medical office issue, a mental health office issue. You want to keep a court issue. You definitely want to keep subjectivity out of court issue because you don't want these things to be he said, she said. You want these things to be, this is what was said by this person on this day. We're not going to talk about how I felt about it because how I felt about it doesn't matter. It's what was said, when it was said. You see where I'm going with this? So document, document, document. In situations, I have told friends and loved ones, get a binder, start putting everything in the binder, keep it in order, cross-reference against text messages. So as you can see, when you have to advocate on these levels for yourself, when you have to speak up for yourself on these levels, it takes a little bit more work sometimes, and it takes a little bit more attention. Because you need that documentation, it's really important. Bring backup. If you're going into a meeting, you know, a doctor's appointment where you don't understand what's going on, maybe you've had a serious illness. My boyfriend who recently had a major surgical procedure, I've been going to the doctor periodically with him to just kind of ask questions he might not think of. Take notes. Sometimes we hear things differently. You're going into a school meeting. Make sure you have the other parent with you. Make sure there's somebody with you that can be objective. Whatever the situation is, that's a second person that can take notes. That's somebody that may or may not be able to speak up for you if you start getting emotional or upset and need to excuse yourself. And you know, someone that, like I said, can, yes, paper trails are really important. Not always possible, but really important, Danielle. Thank you for that. But also it's just good to have a different set of ears and eyes there, especially if it's somebody that can be, if talking about parents and kids, if you're going to a teacher conference and mom's really emotional and dad's like really reasonable and just low key and cool, the two of you are going to see and hear completely different things in that conference. And dad might pick up on something mom doesn't, and vice versa. Dad might remember to ask a question that mom doesn't because mom's starting to steam or get frustrated. And dad is like, no, hang on, let me ask this question. And then that question might clear everything up. So whenever you have an opportunity, if you're going to the doctor, if you're going to take someone else, especially if it's a highly volatile situation, you're upset about a diagnosis you just received, whatever, having that second set of eyes and ears can make a huge difference. You're not ganging up on them. You're taking support. You're taking support to make sure you hear everything, see everything, catch all of the details. You understand what I'm saying? So if you're helping someone or you need help, I don't know about Android platforms, but iPhone has a really cool notes feature that you can share with other people. So a lot of times, like with my boyfriend and medical appointments, if he's worried about remembering questions and I can't make it to his appointment, I'll start a shared note and I'll have the questions listed out so that he can open that up on his end because it's a shared note and he can see those questions and then he can put down the answers or change the questions in real time. And the next time I open it, I'm going to see that. That's been really handy on a lot of different occasions. So the point is, take notes, bring questions. I have been known to walk into meetings with a bullet point list of questions to make sure I didn't forget anything, so that I also had a piece of paper to write down the answers. Okay? And let me tell you something, people notice that. They notice when you come in prepared, they're like, ugh, we probably better pay attention to her. You know what I'm saying? So if you're helping someone or you need help, iPhone shared notes are handy. Having someone with you is stellar. Take notes, bring questions, bring examples, depending on the situation. Bring everything together in one place so that you're not digging and searching for this stuff when you need it. Okay? When you are making that phone call or returning that phone call or doing the follow-up. And then the most important things, whether this is a personal relationship, a personal thing that you're dealing with where you're standing up for yourself, a work thing, a medical thing, whatever, define what the next step is going to be. When you're done with the conversation, whatever that looks like, define what the next step is going to be before the conversation is over. And then follow-ups, second opinions sometimes, all of those things are totally okay. So these are more specific ways that we can advocate for ourselves in bigger situations that are based on the skills I talked about in the beginning with speaking up for ourselves. So I know this one ran a little long today, and I'm sorry, but there's a lot of important information here, and the truth is that we could have broken this up probably over a series. There's a lot of digging in you can get. I'm going to drop a couple of links in the comments along with last week's video to see some of the things that are talked about when it comes to, one has to do with bullying, and when people lack the ability to stand up for themselves, they more often get victimized because certain types of people look for people who don't stand up for themselves. They shop for us. So I'm going to drop a Psychology Today a link to an article in there. I'm going to drop those I feel statements, those I statements. But here's the things I want you to remember. Being assertive is about clarity and it's about persistence, not volume. That's super important. And some people, like myself, sometimes we get a little loud because we're passionate. And that is sometimes perceived as aggression when we're really just getting excited. So remember, again, that assertiveness is about clarity and persistence, not volume. Sometimes your voice is the only thing bridging the gap between you and what you need, or your loved one and what they need, especially when it comes to like kids in mental health situations, bullying situations. We are the only advocate they have, and we are their best. They may have other advocates, but you can never really be sure about those. You as a parent or guardian, you can know that you are their best advocate, and there are ways that you can act as and go off on someone. So again, remember, being assertive is about clarity and persistence, not volume. Sometimes your voice is the only thing bridging the gap between you and what you need, or your loved one and what they need. And when you can breathe through it, to refer to 2 weeks ago when we talked about breathing techniques, when you can breathe through it, you can think through it and speak without losing your cool. So that, again, that minimum weight rule, back off, breathe, arm yourself with knowledge, research, make sure you have all the facts, and check into policy and law surrounding whatever the issue is, if it applies, and make sure that you are going forward from a place of knowledge and understanding. Lead with curiosity. Like Marie said, lead with curiosity instead of coming off on the offensive immediately. And I promise you, if you practice these things, you will build confidence, you will become more assertive, and you will get a lot more results. Maybe not all the time, because not everything is going to go the way we want, but you will get a lot better results most of the time if you start practicing some of these techniques. Okay, wow, today was long, but I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please share. It will be here to come back and watch if you had to go, or if you missed the first half or whatever, it will be here. Facebook doesn't delete videos for 4 weeks. And in the meantime, like I said, I just hope you found it helpful. Please share if you did. Let me know in the comments if you have questions, comments, and watch for some links to drop here shortly. And thank you so much. And I will see you next week. I think I have a topic already decided, but off the top of my head, we're going to talk about sitting and what sitting does to our overall health. So that should be super interesting. We're going to speak up for ourselves, but not from a sitting position. I love you. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a fabulous day and be well.